All right. Hi, everybody. So,
Hello.
welcome to the third of our Star Wars reviews and discussions. And this is now we're doing episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. We already have posted reviews of Attack of the Clones and Phantom Menace, and uh, we're excited to be talking about a semi-decent film. And this is the first one that I have enabled the Q&A. So if anybody's watching or anybody starts watching live, give it a try, and we can see if it'll be my first time trying to do that. But anyway, let's just quick introduce. We have Abby and Jeremy again here with me. I'm Rachel, and so if you guys just want to say hi real quick.
Hi, I'm Abby.
Hi, Jeremy.
Okay, great. Well, just kind of like the other two films, I did a little summary, and this one's a little more complicated than the other two. So anyway, I'm just going to read it, and then we will have our discussion. So, uh, so excuse me while I read for a second. Episode 3 starts out with the war between the Republic and the Separatists. ObiWan and Anakin lead a rescue of Chancellor Palpatine from General Grievous. They confront Count Dooku, who Anakin kills at Palpatine's urging. Later on Coruscant, Padme announces to Anakin that she is pregnant. Anakin is happy over the news, but also worried because of the rules against Jedi loving. Anakin also becomes worried when he has a dream of Padme dying while giving birth. Anakin is angry when the Jedi Council decide against making him a Jedi Master. Palpatine feels he will be able to manipulate Anakin, and he goads his ego and tells him about the power of the dark side to possibly overcome death. He then tells Anakin that he is the Sith Lord Darth Sidious. Anakin tells Mace Windu this, who then confronts Palpatine. The two fight, and Palpatine is nearly defeated, but Anakin decides he needs to know how to save Padme, so he stops Windu, who then Palpatine kills. After this, Anakin pledges with the dark side and is named Darth Vader. Obi-Wan kills Grievous, and then Palpatine changes the orders of the clone army using Order 66 to kill the Jedis, and Anakin is sent to the Jedi Temple, and he oversees all Jedis. He oversees the killing of all Jedis, even children in training. The only survivors are Obi-Wan and Yoda. Vader then kills the Separatist leaders on the volcanic planet Mustafar, while Palpatine convinces the Senate to change from a republic to a galactic empire. Padme hears of Anakin's betrayal and goes with Obi-Wan to Mustafar. Vader feels Padme has betrayed him by continuing to associate with Obi-Wan, and he force chokes her, and she collapses. Obi-Wan and Vader have a lightsaber battle over the lava. Obi-Wan severs Vader's limbs, and he is burned in the lava. Meanwhile, Yoda battles Palpatine with the lightsaber and other methods, but ends up escaping. Padme has twins, Luke and Leia. Before dying, Palpatine then creates a body and respiratory mask for Vader so that he can go on living, creating the iconic Darth Vader we know. Obi-Wan and Yoda hide the twins, Leia with Senator Organa in Alderaan, and Luke with his uncle Owen in Tatooine. Woo! So that is Revenge of the Sith. What do you think?
I think you got everything.
That summary?
Yeah, good.
Okay, good. All right. Well, let's just start with, like we've done with the others, on sort of your general impressions on the rewatch. For me, this was actually a first-time watch, not a rewatch. So I'll go last. If I know, Jeremy, you had said this is your favorite, I believe. What do you think on a rewatch?
I still agree with that. And there's a lot of reasons for it, but it's the main thing is this is the missing piece for us, connecting the prequels to the original trilogy. This is the real, where they build all those bridges to what happened before, to what we knew from our childhood. And to me, this is really the story, and I kind of mentioned this in our first two reviews. This is the story that Lucas was wanting to tell with the prequels, and I think that you can see that in the way that it plays out. It's a much it's much better than the first two. It's a better story. It flows better, and it just there isn't as much in it that doesn't make sense, because again you're finally getting to the story you were intending to tell without having to create filler to get through pieces that were too long. So
Yeah.
I still say it's my favorite one, and we'll get into some of those reasons as we answer your questions today.
Cool. Great. What about you, Abby?
Well, I'm thinking back to when I first saw this movie, and I don't remember a lot about it. I remember it being a very cool experience, though. We went, although I don't remember any events surrounding it. I know Jeremy and I were married in 2005. We were pretty young, though, and I know we went to a premiere because I remember sitting in a theater and the people just cheering at certain parts. And I'm glad that I did it that way. I'm glad that I saw it in the theater at the premiere because that was just a really fun experience. It was really fun to see the movie that way. This time, of course, I wasn't writing the emotion of the film as much, and I was looking at it with a more critical eye, I guess, and a little bit more mature eye, and I saw some more of its flaws than I saw the first time. But I think a lot of the emotion, when it comes to Anakin anyway, it really holds up, and I think we do finally get that origin story for Darth Vader that we were kind of looking for all along with these movies. So I think it's an imperfect movie, but I think it satisfies its role in the set of movies in the series.
Cool. Yeah. So the reason why I didn't watch this one before this time was I was either on my mission or I had just returned from my mission, and I hated the second one so much because I came back from my mission in 2005. It was about April, so it was I'm not sure when the release was, but anyway, and I just hated 2 so much that I had no interest in seeing 3 at all at the time. And because I didn't really see that many movies when I first got home for the first couple years, really. So anyway, it was an interesting experience to watch it all these years later, and I think it's definitely way stronger than the other 2, and I can appreciate certain aspects of it, but I still, in the end, I kind of left feeling like, sort of my overall. I could kind of take it or leave it, but I think it has a lot more strengths than the other 2 for sure. So, and I think it still has some of the weaknesses of the other 2, but so we will talk about that. But that was sort of my overall thought, was just kind of take it or leave it. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to. Okay, so that is good. The first, I think people are putting comments or something, but I'm not seeing them in the question part. Sorry, I was just trying to see if I could see it. But anyway, so the first question that I had is, were you surprised to see Count Dooku killed so quickly? And I'll just start. I was shocked by that. I thought that was really surprising because you have such a strong actor in Christopher Lee, and he'd been building up all the momentum, and he just started building the Death Star and was like one of the better parts of 2. And so for him so quickly, I thought that was really surprising for me.
Yeah, I think here you have a case of having too many villains and too little time to get rid of them all, because you end up having to face, you know you're going to have the fight with Vader, and you have to have a fight with Palpatine at the end, but then before you get there, you have to take care of Grievous, and you have to take care of Dooku, and I just think he ended up drawing the short straw. I think you could have taken Grievous first and then built up to Dooku in the middle. But again, you've got 4 major villains that are going to be in a fight at some point before the end.
But why even have Grievous? Why not just have Dooku? why introduce a whole new villain when you have a perfectly good one that you've actually developed a little bit?
More lightsabers.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it was definitely, let's get Dooku out of the way so we can kind of move on with the story and do other things. Maybe not the most graceful way to take care of that.
I really think the only other way I could explain it is you have the fight with Dooku really is highlighting how far Anakin has progressed to that point, but also showing his slide towards the dark side as he follows Palpatine's suggestion to go forward with the execution rather than holding him for trial, which is interesting when he stands up for Palpatine against Mace Windu, demanding the same thing that he didn't allow for Dooku later. But then also I see the fight with Grievous as that whole campaign is a really good highlight of Obi-Wan's skill, which I don't know that we necessarily question how skilled he is, but we haven't, I think it's really the best example of just how skilled he is as a fighter, and especially against an enemy that seems to overpower him.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess that's true. He is a somewhat formidable opponent, but I feel like, Dooku was pretty strong against Yoda. I mean, he certainly could be a strong opponent for Obi-Wan, it would seem like. But yeah, it's interesting. It was an interesting choice. It really surprised me, and I guess I felt like maybe they got so much complaints about 2 that I really felt like they were kind of like, we are going to distance ourselves from 2 as much as humanly possible. It's kind of like they distance themselves from Jar Jar as much as humanly possible. And so I don't know, I just kind of wondered if like they have very little of their romance, they have very little of Dooku's not in there for very long, and so it just made me kind of wonder if maybe that was part of it, but it's hard to say, I guess.
The weirdest thing to me about this fight was actually that Dooku disposed of Obi-Wan so quickly. Like, he just kind of knocks him out at the beginning of the fight, and then it's really Anakin and him going one-on-one. So I guess the fight with Grievous really redeemed Obi-Wan in my eyes for the movie, but it bugs me how easily he was just kind of knocked out of that fight.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. That surprised me as well. Okay, sorry. I was just still trying to get this, see if I could get these comments. Somebody's making comments and I can't see them. Oh well. I feel bad. But
I thought maybe they'd be in the little green chat window, but they're not.
And yeah. I'm clicking on the Q&A, and I'm not seeing them under the Q&A either.
I just keep hearing the little ding notice thing, but I'm not seeing them for some reason. But sorry. But anyway, I'll just ignore that. Yeah. So it definitely caught you off guard for sure. So the next. My next question is, could you have just had an episode 3? Because when you think about it, like episode 4, all this stuff is kind of going, but we got the little scroll at the beginning kind of explaining where we're starting from, but we really didn't need to know kind of what Leia had been doing, with the rebels, or what things had been, we just kind of enter the world mid-conflict. We don't have any problem. I don't know, there's just a part of me that's like, could we just have this movie? Do we even need either of the other 2 movies? What do you think?
I have the same feeling as you. I definitely don't. See, the thing is, okay, so, I invited my brother. I was like, hey, you want to come join us sometime? He's like, no, I like the first 3 movies too much. You guys wouldn't like me.
Oh, yeah?
But his big argument for the first 3 movies is, it's fun. Quit overthinking it. But my feeling is, the first 2 movies are not fun. They're so boring.
Yeah.
It's not a Jane Austen novel. It's a Star Wars movie. It shouldn't be 90% people standing and sitting around talking.
Yeah.
Not fun to watch that.
Right.
So, as far as, if you're looking at the Star Wars series from that angle, like, this is supposed to be a fun action movie for just to enjoy, then yes, number 3 is really the only one we needed, because the other two weren't fun to watch. They might have been fun to watch in the theater somewhat when they premiered and there was a lot of excitement around them, but they faded. Like, as soon as you watch them again, you're like, oh, this is terrible. And this third one, it holds up a little bit. It's fun to watch, at least.
Yeah, I think so. I think they just, I hate to be cynical, but I feel like, well, we had a trilogy, so we've got to have a trilogy. We can't just have one prequel, kind of. And, like, the other 3, like, I don't think that they're necessarily set up to be a trilogy. You know what I mean? Like, because the first one was a concise story in and of itself. Like, if that movie had bombed, we could have had just 4. We could have had just that story, and that would be it. And so, I think maybe you could say that Empire and Return of the Jedi were written to be part of each other, but and made to be part of each other. But as far as the first one, and I don't know, I just feel like each of those movies can sort of stand by themselves as their own stories.
Right.
And I don't know. What do you think, Jeremy?
No, I agree. And I think I mentioned last time, 1 and 2 easily should have been one movie together. And as far as getting rid of them all together, I don't know. I think you do get a good amount of backstory that, to me, is at least interesting enough to warrant one movie, to where we see young Anakin and then, progressing Anakin as he's in his late teens and still a Padawan. But I definitely don't see 3 movies there. I kind of wonder if there was just pressure, since the first one was episode 4, and then they're like, well, we got to go back and do 1, 2, and 3. But either way, I wouldn't have done away with them altogether. I think there were good pieces there, but definitely not enough to justify the 4+ hours of content that they produced.
Yeah,
I think you kind of pinpointed, Rachel. I think you kind of pinpointed the problem with these ones is Lucas is too concerned with the overarching story and not concerned enough with the stories individually. Because that's a really important aspect when you have a series like this. You have to have a good overarching story, but each story has got to stand on its own to some degree, or else it's just not going to be enjoyable.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know, it just leaves, like, even, like, all the great blockbusters, like Back to the Future, yeah, it has, we're continuing on, but it's a concise, it finishes. Mm-hmm. And same thing with Lord of the Rings. They're all, like, finished stories for that part, And so, anyway, I think...
So I'll share, too, if anyone's interested, we actually just watched today a couple of YouTube videos called "What If Star Wars Episode 1 Were Good and What If
those are good.
2 Were Good." There's a bit of profanity in there, but they were really great suggestions for how to actually have made those stories good.
Yeah, those are really good videos. It's called, I think, Belated Media is the name of the channel. That's a good recommendation. Okay, we got a question. So thank you. We have Joe Tefano, and this was actually a question that I was going to ask next. Or one of the next ones is, how do you feel about Hayden Christensen in Revenge of the Sith in comparison to his performance in Attack of the Clones? And we can kind of talk about the acting in general. So thank you for the question, Joe. I appreciate it. So Abby, you want to go first on this?
Sure. I think Hayden Christensen just comes off as this, like, creepy little weirdo emo teenager to me, and I think on one hand that's kind of okay. Like, it makes sense that Darth Vader would have been a creepy emo teenager and young adult. So I think his acting is not good, but it's not good in a way that almost kind of fits. So they get by with it.
Yeah, and I'll say in episode 2, I was not a fan at all. I would, but then when he got to episode 3, I would say it was good. It was not great, but it was good enough that most of what he was doing was believable. I think the hair choice was unbelievably better, and it's still
Bad, but better.
not great, but you're going from the rat tail plus pony little thing to something
Yeah.
different, and that was much better. But the acting, a great improvement from him between the two, but still not going to win him any awards.
The redneck Jedi look is gone, so that's good. But yeah, I still wasn't a big fan. I think the thing that helps him in this one is he's just given way less to say, and so he's much better. And most of the time he's fighting or you know, and the scene with the one or maybe two scenes of romantic dialogue are still pretty bad to him and Padme, but a lot of it is just them just like staring at each other, kind of Twilight-ish. But I would take that any day over that, or staring outside. I'd take that any day over when they're talking.
Now,
So,
is that it though? Is it that he is not making a connection with Natalie Portman? Because in his scenes with Obi-Wan, I'm kind of okay with him, but with Natalie Portman, I'm not buying it.
yeah, it could be. Yeah, they have no chemistry at all. It's just not.
Yeah,
It doesn't work.
it's bad.
So he's used more effectively here than he was in, but I still think he's pretty wooden and pretty. And we'll talk about it in a second. But okay, so the next question that I have is that what do you think of sort of the overall story? And I'll just go first. I found it really confusing. I was just, everybody's on these different planets and who was doing what and what's going on, and I had to, like, in order to write my summary, I had to do like quite a bit of kind of research and reading and be like, oh, that was the plot. So I did find it kind of confusing, but I still think it's better than 1 and 2. At least it has a climax that actually matters, and it has like real conflict, and it has actual adversaries that are involved, with Palpatine as like a worthy adversary. So that's kind of how I felt. I was like, I'm confused, but it's still somehow better. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, okay, so that's how I felt with all 3 of the movies. I felt like afterward, okay, what is the plot? Who am I cheering for? Who am I cheering against? And what's the main conflict? Oh, there's 532 main conflicts. That's why I couldn't figure out what it was. In this one, I actually found the complexity of it more forgivable because there's one that stands out so much more strongly than the others, and that's Darth Vader becoming Darth Vader.
Yeah.
So I was able to forgive the complexity of the other things going on a little bit more in this one than I was in the previous ones.
And again, I think the complexity of the story is just partly due to the, galactic nature, if you will, of the conflict that's going on. That it is meant to demonstrate that it's going on across this entire galaxy. There are, I don't know, hundreds of planets involved, if not thousands, that are in this system that are, under the control of the new empire. So I think that it just is it's George Lucas trying to convey the size of this, what's going on. And so that's why you have so many different storylines and different planets, and people going to different places is partly to convey the size, but also you're having the third of 3 movies, and this one is having to tie up every loose end that was created. And so much like Return of the King in The Lord of the Rings. I felt like it had it had a lot going on because of wrapping up every endpoint that was created in the previous two movies.
That's a good point. Well, and not only that, they had to make everything tie into to episode 4.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think they do an amazing job of setting you up for episode 4, and right at the end you feel like, oh, this is perfect transition, like we get it.
Because I kept wondering, I'm like, what is this Organa guy? Who is he? What's he doing? Where does he matter? And then of course you get it at the end, so I felt like that was a plot point that was only there, and character only there to tie into 4, because you needed a place for Leia to go and kind of introduce Alderaan. But yeah, so like I said, I still felt it was stronger because it actually had a climax that mattered, and it actually had an antagonist and a protagonist that finally, after. So, okay. My next question is, what did you think of General Grievous? And why don't you start, Abby?
I honestly think his entire purpose was that George Lucas had this cool idea for a villain, and he put it in the movie. And that's fine. He is kind of cool, and it's kind of cool the way that he's defeated, and whatever. I don't have strong feelings one way or the other about it.
Yeah. What about you, Jeremy?
I like him again as a villain. I think you uncomplicate the story a bit if you remove him. I don't think it would necessarily have been a bad thing. But if you're going to have another villain, I really like him. He's actually kind of a Vader-like character. Just knowing some of his backstory, he was a formidable warrior who was involved with Palpatine in some way. Ended up not wanting to move on and go down that route, but he was severely injured, and then became kind of like Vader. He sort of became half machine. He was encased in this droid basically, but you can see under the mask that it's a living being under there. And but I really like the idea of him being trained in using the lightsabers by Dooku, and just kind of making what just is a really intimidating opponent. And also, I mentioned to Abby when we were watching it, I really like the connection from what Obi-Wan says after killing Grievous to what he says in Episode 4. After killing Grievous, he casts away the blaster that he used to kill him and says, "So uncivilized," and that connects to when he's teaching Luke about the lightsaber and calls it an elegant weapon from a more civilized age.
I would never have thought of that. That's really good. That's very true. I was not a fan of Grievous. I didn't like his voice. I didn't like the characters. I didn't even realize any of that about it being a person, and I missed that. Like I said, I've only seen it one time.
You have to tell me.
And I guess I just felt like, wow, you had Christopher Lee. You had an awesome villain. Why did you replace him with this? And I thought the scene with the 4 or 5 lightsabers, I thought that was super silly. I don't know. I didn't like it. But yeah, it's interesting. But okay, so what do you think about the pregnancy revelation? And did you like the way that was handled? Did you find it compelling? I'll go first on this one. I thought it was pretty good, considering the lack of chemistry and the horrible romantic dialogue. I felt like you saw him kind of go from being actually happy to being worried and sad, and Lucas allowed there to be no dialogue, which I think helped. And I didn't like the way that I felt like in this film, Padme is just purely there to be Anakin's worry, to be like, oh honey, don't do that, don't go over there, don't, and I mean, I said in the last film that I felt like, what is the proof that she's a strong woman? But in this, that's just gone. It's gone.
No pretense of her being a strong moment whatsoever.
No. I mean, she's just there waiting in some room in almost every scene, and just kind of peering and cooing, and that I thought was not my favorite. But as far as there were parts of it that I thought were pretty well done, and I liked that. So I don't know. What did you think about that, the whole pregnancy thing? What do you think, Jeremy?
I don't know. The revelation to Anakin, he was just kind of, oh yeah, it's great, it's wonderful, and then he has the dream, and then he's preoccupied about that the rest of the time. So I don't know. Again, I think with better acting, it would have gone off better. I wasn't particularly impressed in that moment.
Yeah, me either. Okay, so just move on. The next question is: Are the Jedi pretty stupid to not see Palpatine as the Sith Lord? Did you buy that they took them so long to see it? If they're supposed to be these all-seeing Jedis?
If you take it in context, the Sith were supposed to have been eradicated for I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of years, and so the Sith have kind of become a myth.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
And so that's how you get the reaction in Episode 1 when Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan report that they ran into a Sith Lord, and the Council's just like, "What? No, you didn't. Like, no." Probably not. And then they are slowly coming to the realization, oh, there is really a Sith Lord, and then Yoda's like, well, yeah, and guess what? There's always two. And so I just feel like they were blinded by by arrogance that they assumed, well, yeah, they were gone and they're still gone and they're not coming back. And so it was really just an unwillingness to see what was right in front of them. Because if they had the context that Sith are around and Sith are a thing, it would have been a lot easier to say, he's one of those things.
Yeah.
Well, but you also have Yoda, and he's wise and stuff. And I don't know. You'd think... I agree that, like, it is a little bit of a stretch for me to believe, because I actually had this exact same thought when I was watching it, Rachel, that why didn't they pick up on this earlier? They're supposed to be like super sensate people who can kind of read situations that we can't read.
Yeah.
And they're totally ignoring this.
Because Anakin can predict the future in the pod race. That's how he's able to win, right?
Right.
Using the Force. I mean,
he's super duper Jedi guy.
Yeah, midichlorians and everything. But you think even Anakin could have predicted some of this? He seemed kind of shocked by it too. But
I'll say in their defense, what they've said, and this is something that's really hard to understand for us non-Jedi.
Gentiles.
They mention how things have become clouded by the dark side of the Force, and so if they're not expecting Sith to be out there, and somehow the dark side clouds their visions, and we don't really fully understand how that works. But if you take into the first account that they don't expect there to be Sith, then they don't expect the dark side to be clouding any of their visions. So they really trust what they see, even if it's not so great as it was. And so they have no reason to not trust that everything's okay. So it's what in their own words, that the dark side has been clouding things. Once they realize there are Sith out there, they're like, whoa, we've been kind of blinded and we don't know what's there.
I think that's a suitable explanation to me. And, one thing that kind of pushes it into, okay, I can buy it, is just the fact that, like, how many people in this world have been deceived by someone who they really thought was good, and they really believed it, and the signs were there that they were really bad. I mean, take Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
And people followed anyway. They were just kind of caught up in it. And so I think that's what kind of pushes me into, okay, I can buy it because people believe.
I guess those are just ordinary people, though, and these are supposedly, these are like philosopher kings, basically.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. Okay, so I have my next question is: Palpatine tempts Anakin with promises of cheating death for Padme, and then finally convinces him to pledge for the dark side. Did you find that transition believable and compelling? And for me, I found it pretty believable. I felt like the transition from him ratting on Palpatine to Windu, and then there's the fight between Windu and Palpatine, and then him intervening. I felt like all of that was kind of fast to go from ratting to pledging very quickly, seemed to me, but I felt like it was okay. I don't know. What about you?
I agree. I think it was a little bit quick. I noticed that same thing, that it felt a little bit quick. And I kind of turned to Jeremy and I was like, how come he's suddenly like bestest friends with Palpatine? Like,
Yeah.
why wasn't this true in the other movies? And I guess it kind of alludes to the idea that this had been going on and we just didn't really see it. But I don't see why we didn't really see it before. I think it'd be a little more believable if that sort of relationship between them had been more evident in the previous movie.
Well, we get so little of Palpatine in the previous films. That was one of my complaints I said in the last review.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this that idea of them having time together, it's evidenced by a couple of things in this film, where when Palpatine's talking with him, he mentions how Anakin had talked to him about killing the Sand People, which I don't think he's fully revealed to anyone else, to my knowledge. And so you just kind of have that hint that he's become a second mentor, or at least a friend, who's he's willing to open up to more so than ObiWan in some respects.
Yeah.
So I see. I really like the transition. I feel like it's probably the best. It was the most well done storyline in the movie, was the Anakin transition to Vader. I think Ian McDiarmid was he did an amazing job with his role. Probably the best acting in the movie. I really enjoyed, especially his conversations with Anakin, and just the way that he kind of takes him step by step down that path. And he really, I buy it because the foundation was really laid in the first two movies, where you have, especially in episode 2, when Anakin goes back and his rage drives him to kill the Sand People, he still loses his mother, and it drives him crazy, up to take out all the Sand People and their children like that. And so you see that he has this incredible ability to lose control. And then moving in here to having that be his greatest fear, is losing those who are closest to him. And he's already lost his mother, and it was incredibly traumatic. And then to face this idea of losing Padme and having these visions, I definitely see it, and I believe it, being a good driver for him to the dark side. As far as going from pledging, right up to pledging himself after betraying Windu, I feel like he felt immediately responsible for Windu's death, and that put him over the edge. Like he'd beheaded Count Dooku when he shouldn't have. He'd killed the Sand People when he shouldn't have, and he's going down this dark path, and finally betraying Windu was like the final straw, because Windu had Palpatine. He could have killed him, and Anakin walks in and stops that, even though he knows it's a Sith Lord, and he should have went ahead and let him kill him. But he sided with Sidious at that point and allowed him to kill Windu. And so I think because of his complicity in that murder, he felt that for Anakin himself, he felt that his transition to the dark side was pretty well complete at that point, and said, "I've got nothing left to do. I can't go back to the Jedi now, so this is what I've got."
That makes sense. That's interesting. Okay, so the next question I have is all about lightsaber duels. And this brings in a question that Joe has asked, our viewer, one of our viewers. He says, how did you feel about the lightsaber fight between Yoda and Palpatine? I still remember people in the theater laughing at Yoda knocking down the 2 Imperial guards. And, I wasn't a big fan of the Yoda lightsaber battle in 2. That was, and I feel like I was actually validated by the Yoda, by my feelings in that too, by the Yoda lightsaber battle here, because every time Yoda picks up the lightsaber, it ends up hurting him. Like it ends up, he's much more powerful when he's moving stuff with the Force and he's doing the Force lightning and all of that. Like when he picks up the lightsaber, that's when he starts to lose momentum. Every time in this lightsaber battle. And so for me, it was just like added verification or validation that he should never be using lightsabers, that Yoda should be using the Force. And but aside from that, so we'll talk about that, but also I just made a list of the various battles. You have Obi-Wan and Anakin versus Dooku, Obi-Wan versus Grievous, Mace Windu versus Palpatine, Anakin versus Obi-Wan, Yoda versus Palpatine. So there's a lot of lightsaber action going on here. And I guess what did you think of the Yoda one? And which one, I guess, did you like? Which one didn't you like? That kind of a thing as far as the lightsaber fighting.
Well, I actually feel like the Yoda lightsaber scenes are kind of overly criticized. I don't know. I just don't think... I definitely see your point of view, and I get where you're coming from, but I just don't think it matters. Like, one way or another, he's using the Force to get bad guys, and he's good at it either way, and it's fine. I honestly don't care about the lightsaber battles enough to have an opinion, probably. For most of them, the only one I did care about was the Obi-Wan and Anakin and Vader lightsaber duel, and that was cool. I felt like it was pretty well done. On this viewing, it was like, wow, that's a green screen. With the whole lava situation.
Yeah,
but
it's pretty cheesy.
Yeah. But other than that, I mean, I think it's a well choreographed bit of movie, and it was really intense, and it drew me in, so that was my favorite of all of them, and I wouldn't have an opinion on the others because I was just like, oh, look, people battling with lightsabers. There's that happening.
Well, I think lightsaber battles are the most iconic thing in the Star Wars universe. I mean, that's what, when you hear a lightsaber sound, when you see a lightsaber, like, it's automatically Star Wars, and it's just a huge part of what we first fell in love with when we watched A New Hope, was that lightsaber being fired up for the first time, and you're like, whoa, it's amazing. And so this one, I think, is the best of the first 3 movies at treating the lightsaber battles. It's the first time I really don't, like, the choreographing doesn't come through all the time. Mm-hmm. A lot of it looks more fluid than in the first 2, or more natural. As far as the individual fights, with Palpatine and Yoda, I really like it. Not the whole, like, they didn't necessarily have to go at it with lightsabers. An interesting thing with Palpatine or Sidious fighting with his lightsaber is he moves in such an unnatural way with it. Like, you can see he uses the Force. Like, when the Jedi, the 4 of them show up, and Mace Windu's at the lead, and he says, "You're under arrest," and Sidious's lightsaber pops out of nowhere, and then he, like, does this spiral thing right at the camera, right towards the Jedi, and then just dispatches 2 of them right away. You just see his power and control with the lightsaber. I liken his movements with the kind of the way he uses the Force to propel his body to what Yoda does when he's in a lightsaber battle, because he makes movements that seem unnatural for the way he hobbles around on a cane, and so they both are very adept at using the Force for their battle movements.
Mm-hmm.
Moving a little bit farther on in Yoda and Sidious's battle, my biggest complaint with it is when they move up into the Senate chambers and they're hurling these pods at each other. We actually get to what I think is right before Yoda gives up, and to me inexplicably.
Yeah, I hate that. I don't like that he gives up.
I don't understand why he gave up and left. He actually had just had his best retaliation. He absorbed every bit of Force lightning that Sidious could throw at him and throw it back at him, and obviously dealt a major blow to him. And then he fell down, and that was it. So if we go by the Obi-Wan and Darth Vader thing, where I've got the high ground and I win, then okay, I guess Sidious had the high ground and therefore he won. But if you want a further explanation of that fight, you can go watch Gilmore Girls. Luke and Lorelai have a fight throughout an entire episode about the high ground being how Jedi.
That's funny. Yeah, I didn't like that at all. The way that I felt like Yoda was actually kind of weakened to me from what he was in the original trilogy by these prequels. But I don't know, maybe I'm just too caught up in that. But I actually didn't mind, and I kind of enjoyed, even though the special effects are sort of cheesy, I didn't mind the lightsaber battle with the lava and everything between Vader and Obi-Wan. I thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah, and that one, to me, it just highlights how young they are, and how, because if you fast forward 20 or so years to episode 4, and they're just like barely swinging these things around at each other, and part of it is LucasArts kind of changed, or Lucasfilm changed how they treat lightsaber battles for the original trilogy. They swing them around with a lot more ease rather than this huge two-handed broadsword thing, which is kind of how they were in episode 4, but I'll let them attribute it to the characters being much older and just not being able to handle it as well. But I just feel like this is the style of lightsaber fighting that we probably wanted all along. Just, it's flashy, it's fast, it's dynamic, and they're using their environment to help fight each other. And it was just an excellent fight in my mind.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. What about you, Abby? You already said that you liked it. Okay, next question is, what do you think about the political stuff with Palpatine convincing the Senate to go from a republic to an empire? And I'll just say, I thought it worked pretty well. I thought that stuff was better in this one than in any of the others. There wasn't that much of it, and so it didn't drag on as much as the other ones did as far as the political stuff. And you just got to the core, sort of, they're giving up their voice in order to be part of this empire. Kind of the main thing, the main message, as opposed to all of the talking. And so I thought it was pretty good. I still think that it would be more effective as far as a political commentary if you actually saw more than just the Senate that was making this change. Like, if they're really trying to say that this is a republic changing into an empire, I think it would be much more convincing if there was some kind of outcry, public outcry, wanting this to happen, because that's what would have to happen in a republic. If it's purely just the leadership, then that's like an aristocracy, or that's how they do it in China. That's not a republic. So I think I would have made it even better, but maybe that's just an impossibility when you're dealing with different planets and everything. I don't know.
I feel like the whole political climate of all of these movies is kind of like suspect. I just don't think that a democracy works or a republic works on that kind of a scale. Like, I find it absurd that there are hundreds and hundreds of senators. And, I know in the House of Representatives we have like 400 or whatever, but I even think that that's too many. Like, I think that our democracy is too big. And so I find it absurd that in space we have a functioning republic. Like, I just don't buy that many people are ever going to get anything done. And so in the end, what you have is tyranny, basically, because you have the leader saying, hey, let's do this. And you have so many people that you can't have a functional conversation about this topic.
Yeah.
So you all just kind of say, all right.
Yeah, it does seem like it'd be hard to have any kind of election, let's just say, when you're dealing with bodies spaced light years apart. It's going to be a problem. Yeah, I agree. What do you think, Jeremy, about the politics? You have any?
I agree with you. It was nice to have it not be so much. I think, again, just with the constraints that were put on the movie, that you've got to get to an empire, and you started with a republic, you've got to have some way to get there, and this way was as believable as any, as far as how you make the transition. And you do see the Palpatine really making those shifts in power from the very first movie, where he is able to get himself promoted, and then able to get himself granted emergency powers in the second, so that he can command the clone army or have it commissioned for the Republic. And then so I see it as a pretty solid transition, and then finally just saying, you know what, for the safety and security of all people, we're going to make it an empire so that we can fight off the Jedi threat, and you'll all be safe and happy. So we're going to do it, and then that's it.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
It's as good as we could have hoped for. I don't know that there's necessarily a much better way to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if, like, maybe in Coruscant you could have shown, like, people sort of outcry about it, but yeah, I get it. It's tough with the situation, and I didn't mind it. I thought it was okay.
I think what you do get, as far as outcry, you get episode 4. You see, there's a rebellion.
Yeah, good point.
To me, that's what happens is you have this happens in the council chambers, and then you find out, you know what, there's a whole lot of people out there who are not happy with that, and therefore rebellion.
That's a good point. Okay, so the next question I have is, we already kind of talked about Anakin and ObiWan. One of the things I think would have made the Anakin-Obi-Wan fight even better is I didn't feel like they had any kind of friendship. Like, if it had really felt like, it shows them kind of kidding each other a little bit at the beginning, but I don't know. I never felt that in the movie, and so, like, it didn't feel like as much of a betrayal as it probably should have felt. Mm-hmm. You know, and when he says you were the chosen one and kind of things, like, it just didn't. It felt like this, instead of it feeling like almost a father-son kind of thing, which it really would have been if he'd been his primary guardian from the time he's 7. It just felt like this is this annoying person who I don't even like very much.
That's how we all felt about Anakin.
So I think that hurt it a little bit, but so what did you think about the special effects as a whole? We talked a little bit about it, but I felt like they were brighter and a little bit more pleasant to look at this time, but there were still, like, I didn't think Grievous looked very good. There were definitely characters and things that I still felt like looked pretty cheap, even though I know they're not cheap. But I don't know. What did you think? Overall, I thought it was better.
Well, first I wanted to talk a little bit about what you mentioned.
Oh, yeah, please.
And Obi-Wan. And that relationship, again, in those videos we mentioned, the What If episodes 1 and 2 were good. They go into that quite a bit. About how, basically you don't see the relationship, you just have to understand that it's there, and you get a little bit of it in the opening sequence when they're both in their space fighters, and Anakin comes to Obi-Wan's aid to get the buzz droids off of his fighter, and have a good dialogue together in that whole scene. And even afterward, as they're kind of flying into Coruscant, and they're still having some, you have that. It's the only moment really where you get this, yeah, we're friends, and oh yeah, you saved me like 10 times, and he's like, no, just 9. That other one doesn't count, and so you get a sense that there's been something greater, but that's the only time you see it. I have a little added bonus, I guess. I watched the Clone Wars cartoon, and that's back in this time in between episodes 2 and 3, where it's just Anakin and ObiWan going out on all these missions together. And so I know more of the history just by virtue of watching those. And so I guess I have a wider view of their relationship.
That's cool.
So anyway, I do feel like in the movie, at least, they didn't do enough to show that, because most of the time you're like, okay, so he's hiding from Obi-Wan because he knows he's doing things he shouldn't, and Obi-Wan's just kind of seems like he's pestering him about, staying on the light and doing what's right, and so that's kind of where I am.
That's good. Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna. And anyway, I was just gonna ask the question again, like, what you thought of the special effects, but.
Yeah, so I'm happy with them in the film overall. I actually really liked the treatment of Grievous, especially close up. You get a really good view of kind of that mesh of the life form plus the machine, and if you go back, you'll see in the close-ups, like his eyes, especially, you can tell, and that's how. That's what Obi-Wan kind of opened up Grievous's chest in the middle of the fight, and then that's when he was able to fire with the blaster. Those are actually the internal organs of the living being that he was shooting rather than the machine.
I missed all of that. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, so I actually think he was really well done for what he was, but I didn't have any problem with many of the effects. There was no glaring weird CG cows this time, so overall happy.
Yeah,
I agree. I think it was more palatable. Whenever I criticize the special effects in these movies, Jeremy's like, keep in mind it was 10 years ago. But I'm like, no, invalid excuse. Because Jurassic Park.
Well, Jurassic Park used a lot of live, real special effects. Like, it used a lot of Jim Henson and things creating dinosaurs and stuff. So,
but that's the difference. Like, Jurassic Park, they knew where to end the CG and start the puppetry. And this, they didn't know when to quit with all the CG.
I agree. Okay, I only have 2 more questions, believe it or not. The next one is the creation of Darth Vader. Do you buy it? And for me, I thought it was pretty good. The only little nitpick that I have with it is the no at the end is not my favorite. Partly just because I hate the special editions, and Lucas had to add that in to the Return of the Jedi, which really makes me mad. That has to go add the no in, and so that annoys me. But if I'm just looking at it like without that sort of chip on my shoulder, I think it's pretty well done. I liked it.
Yeah, I think it's cool.
I like the scene. I think it's, it was one of the parts of the teaser that everybody was looking forward to, is that moment when, because when he says Anakin is Darth Vader, when Sidious says, "Rise, Lord Vader," the first time, and you're just like, it's still Anakin. He's not Vader until he's in the suit. And, you have this transition, continuous transition too, and his hate is kind of simmering throughout the film, and it comes to a head when he's burning on the shores of the lava flow on Mustafar, and he's just absolutely filled with rage because he realized he wasn't better than Obi-Wan in that moment, because he was just too prideful, and nothing he wanted has gone his way, and everything is lost, and he's just consumed by his hate. And it's like the perfect time for the Emperor to come and pick him up and then put him in the suit, and it's just like, this is it. Like, I finally got exactly what I was looking for in an apprentice, and Vader is completely consumed with the dark side. But then you transition to he's in the suit and the rage is all gone, and it's just like, well, the emo kid is back. Like, well, where's Padme? You know, and then it's just like, oh, you killed her. And it's like, no, she was alive. You know, I don't like, you know, and I love that they brought James Earl Jones in, but I hate the dialogue they had him do. I hate it.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan either. That's interesting. I didn't know what you would think of that because, like I said, I think I'm even more colored because I really hate the special editions, and I hate how Jedi they added that. But
I'll be honest, I don't. I've only owned the special editions for so long that I don't know everything that's been changed. Like, you can see where the CP has been covered, and they put, you know, like scenes in Tatooine are different. But I don't know where they've added everything.
Yeah. We'll talk about that more at the beginning of next one. But I am watching the original theatrical editions, just so you guys know. I have them. You can get them through the 2006 DVDs. They're expensive, but but I wanted the theatrical. So we have another comment from Joe here. He says, "Oh yeah, I hate the no in the scene where we see Anakin being put into the suit because everything else about the scene I personally thought was quite powerful, especially when the famous breathing came in after the mask is put on." Amen.
Yeah.
So one really funny thing about the no is forever ago, I saw a clip on YouTube. It was translated into Japanese and then translated back from the Japanese to English. And when you do that, it's, instead of no, it's do not want.
That's funny. Oh boy.
Now the problem though I have is I don't know what dialogue you put in that scene, or maybe it would be better just to remove dialogue altogether. You want I just don't know what would be best, but I know what's there is not what needed to be there.
Yeah. Generally, removing dialogue in George Lucas films is a good choice. So, even in the original trilogy, I'll say sometimes the dialogue could be removed. Okay, last question. So the Leia is given to Organa to go to Alderaan. Luke is given to Owen on Tatooine. And in reality, does this make any sense? I know that they had to do it because was the episode 4. But if you think about it, isn't the last person that you would want to send Luke to the relative of Anakin, of Vader, who he knows and has been there and is spent time with? It seems like kind of Leia seems like a smart choice, but isn't that kind of silly to send Luke to the one spot that Vader knows?
I don't know. I think it's not an entirely close relationship that these people had to Anakin.
I don't know. He was with him when he came back there with his mother and some pretty intimate stuff.
He was, but
he
again,
didn't grow up with them, did he? It was only a brief meeting, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a brief meeting, and if you look at it from Owen's perspective, so his dad got a slave woman and had a kid. Or so this is the kid of his dad's slave, basically. So it's not like his biological, brother or half brother or anything, but so it's the son of a slave of his dad, and so this isn't a huge connection. They were only there temporarily as Anakin went to try to find his mom. And so, but still, I agree with the point that, why Tatooine? Why with somebody who has a known connection to Anakin? You're almost trying to go for a hiding in plain sight, I think.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Knowing, ObiWan knowing Anakin, if he has discovered anything about it, he knows it's a place of intense pain for Anakin, so even later, he's not going to seek out an opportunity to go to Tatooine. because it's such a hurtful thing. It's the only possible straw I can give them for going there, aside from the just hiding in plain sight.
My only other thought on that is we need it to be a couple, preferably, so this kid has, like, a family and isn't just being raised by, like, a Jedi or whatever. You don't want Yoda raising him. That wouldn't be a good, normal life for a child. And
Luke
so
Skywalker.
you need a couple, or someone who's in a couple that we've already met and isn't dead yet. So there's kind of limited options there.
Yeah, and I guess they really didn't have any choice because that's where he is at the beginning of 4. But
yeah, and then also for the splitting him up, Abby and I talked about that a little bit and like why,
I think that was stupid that they split them up, but Jeremy thinks it's because, what was your explanation?
I thought that perhaps, if they both kind of register, on the Force in some way, you kind of split them up so that their impact on the Force in that area is diminished, so their radar blip is a little smaller, if you will. Also, the way that they leave things with Vader is his understanding is Padme died and therefore never gave birth. And so he doesn't know about the children at all. So if he did learn about them, you'd want to make it harder to get both, or he didn't even know there were two. And so the idea was to protect both. You separate them so one of them has a good shot at living on, because they had high hopes that they would be Force sensitive and that they would be able to be the hope for the Jedi that would come along.
Yeah, that's a fair point. All right, that is my questions, and I know, like I said, I know this is your favorite of Jeremy. So do you have any kind of last things you want to say about the film and why you love it?
It just, to me, it's a good blend of the action that we come to love from this. It has a good bit of humor. I want to say, too, just R2-D2, finally, he's just really awesome in these trilogy movies. Just he takes out two of the advanced battle droids by squirting them with oil and lighting them on fire with his little thrusters, and just a really cool scene for me. And you kind of get, hey, R2-D2, he knows his way around, and but just little things like that. There's a lot of fan service, admittedly, in the movie. But you're also creating connections to the next one. So you get a preview of General Tarkin, and you see Captain Antilles, and the Republic fighter that is the one you see in the opening sequence of Episode 4. So there's a lot of kind of nods to that, and I really like getting all the connections made, and maybe that's why the movie resonates with me so well, is because it finally made all those connections that I wanted to the original trilogy. But just overall,
awesome.
I love the movie. I think there was a lot done really well. I thought that the Order 66 was a really powerful sequence, and I'm not a huge fan of montages, but this one where you just go Jedi to Jedi, and maybe another piece that not everybody sees is this the emotion of the clones as they are going to kill the Jedi on this order. I played Battlefront 2 a few years ago. It's a Star Wars Battlefront 2 video game, and part of it was a campaign where you are part of the 501st Clone unit, and they talk about going through into these fights with the Jedi, and the Jedi were their generals and their leaders, and they trusted them, and they fought alongside them, and just the incredible trust and bond that was built between them. And then this order comes along, and they're required to kill this person that had been, they saved them time and time again in battle, and now they were to turn against them. And so to me, just an incredible amount of emotion in those scenes, and it's you get to see how dark things became for the Empire to rise to power.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that about Order 66. That was I think, a pretty compelling scene, and it certainly was a darkness that we hadn't gotten. I mean, I guess Vader destroys the whole planet, but it's all, you don't actually see the death and destruction and things like that. So yeah, and it makes sense if you watch the Star Wars Rebels show, which I do, and I really like. Some of that pain and some of that between the clones that are on that show, if anybody watches that show, and the Jedi and things. So yeah, that's cool. Like I said, I enjoyed it. I still kind of felt sort of but I did like watching it. So yeah. Do you have any signing off words there, Abby?
I have one little bone to pick.
Okay.
Before we sign off. I know we've been on for a long time, but I'm gonna pick this bone.
All right.
It bothered me this time.
Okay.
Has George Lucas ever met a woman? Because he is. I do not like Padme at all. And when I first watched these 3 movies when I was young, when I was a teenager and a young adult, I just kind of didn't pay that much attention to her or to her piece in this. But that character bugs me so much now, because if we look at her history, she was like the youngest queen ever elected to her planet or whatever. She's a senator later in a Senate that, as far as we can tell, has hundreds and hundreds of people, and almost all of them are men. So we're talking about a young woman who has some serious spunk and has overcome some difficult things. But she's a total wuss bag. Mm-hmm. And in this last movie, she's Princess Peach of the Mario Brothers games. She's the damsel in distress, and she puts herself in that position to some degree.
She dies of a broken heart, which is pretty lame.
No, you're right. Like, that is what bugged me the most, is she lost her will to live because her man turned bad? No. Just no. This is not the kind of woman who needs a man to have the will to live, especially after she's had twin babies. Like, he doesn't understand women at all. A woman who has given birth and had babies will do anything for those babies. Those babies supersede whoever she's in love with, I promise.
Well, yeah, and if you watch his recent, George Lucas's recent Strange Magic, it's this animated cartoon that he made for girls.
I might have to watch that.
It's really bad. It's so yeah, so I don't think he gets what I don't know.
And honestly, if you go based on the characters, it would be Anakin dying of the broken heart rather than Padme.
Right. He's the one who's super emotionally tied into her, and Padme, I love you. And
I've thought about no one else for 10 years. I see you in my dreams, and you look exactly the same. And
right. Yeah, I just think that she is utterly ridiculous. Yeah. And somebody on Twitter the other day tweeted that, and I tweeted it at you guys, that I think George Lucas has autism. Based on his writing of Padme, he very well may.
Yeah, it's not good. That's not for sure. Well, Joe gives us a sign-off. He says, great discussion, guys. Looking forward to next ones on the original trilogy. So, thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Appreciate it. You're awesome. And, yeah, George Lucas, thankfully, isn't the main man at the screenplay for 4, 5, and 6, and thank goodness 7. So we will talk about that next week. Talk about episode 4, which I have to say, like, if I was going off of the one that I think is the best movie, then I would say 5 is the best movie. But I think Empire, I think, is the best movie. But I think that 4 is my favorite, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I just think it's so well paced, and it's so tight, and it's just so fun and entertaining and exciting. And I had the same kind of like great theater experience when I watched the re-release of the first Star Wars back when it was re-released. It was just so much fun. So that will be a real treat for me. And so we will be back next week. And thanks so much. If you guys want to plug your Twitter or your webpage things before we go.
You can catch me at Abby Kid. It's Abby_Kid at Twitter. And we're at jeremyandabbyadopt.wordpress.com.
And I'm Jeremy_Kid on Twitter as well.
Great. And you can find me at Smiling LDS Girl on all the social medias. And thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you all next week.
All right. Thanks.
Good.